On the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz comes an unprecedented exhibition about one of history's darkest moments. Auschwitz, not long ago, not far away, features more than 500 original objects, first-hand accounts, and survivor testimonies that tell the powerful story of the Auschwitz concentration camp, its history and legacy, and the underlying conditions that allowed the Holocaust to happen. On now exclusively at ROM. Tickets at rom.ca.
This is Bonjour Chai, the Conscious Uncoupling edition. I'm Avi Finegold, and I'm here with Phoebe Maltzbovi. We are your Frozen Chosen. On today's show, we talk about the two new films that have been polarizing the Jewish community and the community at large, and we discuss professors leaving their jobs over the current political climate in America. But first, we have an announcement. Phoebe, how are you?
All right. How are you doing, Avi?
I'm doing okay. It's been a bit of travel woes over the past couple of days. I'm recording from LaGuardia Airport in a little soundproof booth that they have here for recording podcasts, waiting for me, obviously. We do apologize, though, for not having a recording last week. We were busy assembling our Great Canadian Seder, which will be live before your actual Seder next week. It's one of our annual shows, and we love putting it together, and we love presenting it to you, and you guys love listening to it. So that will be there coming up next week. This week is actually our last regular show together. It's not a divorce. It is a conscious uncoupling.
I'm starting my own skincare line, very high end.
What is it called?
Gloop.
Oh, I think you should call it the Roncesvalles Apothecary.
I think that might already exist and be some kind of store that sells tinctures of some sort. I think this literally might already happen. I was continuing with your Gwyneth Paltrow reference because of the conscious uncoupling was Gwyneth Paltrow's famous, from the guy from Coldplay.
Of course. Phoebe, you have a new show and I will have a new show. Why don't you tell everybody about your new show first?
It's going to be called The Jewish Angle, and it will be offering the Jewish angle on a variety of topics. If you want a sense of the types of topics that interest me, might I suggest you look at any number of my previous Canadian Jewish News columns, but I could also just say it's sort of cultural criticism, where Jews fit in culture wars North America wide, but also topics to do with pop culture, new novels, new books generally. But there will not be a particularly strong religious angle because I am heathenous.
Heathenous, yes.
So basically, if you like the sorts of topics that I do, you will probably like the Jewish angle. If you don't, it may not be for you. But I think it will be for you because it'll be good. Avi, will you come on as a guest on the Jewish angle?
Of course I will. Yes.
I am honored. And I also wanted to just say how much I have enjoyed being on Bonjour Chai. From learning the title of it to the reality of it, it's been really fun. And Avi is fantastic. And we're not joking about conscious uncoupling. It is all positive, all positive.
Yeah. The new show that I'm going to be part of is called Not in Heaven. And you will be able to hear the new panelists next week on the Great Canadian Seder when we release it. So stay tuned for that and stay tuned for Not in Heaven coming up shortly after Passover. Just to be clear, this is not going to be a whole new feed. If you are not subscribing to Bonjour Chai, you should subscribe now. If you are subscribed, this just will transform into the Not in Heaven feed. And of course, please subscribe to the Jewish Angle as well, because we believe it is a incredible 1-2 knockout punch. This is how we cover the waterfront. Please go check out the Seder next week. I believe that the trailer for The Jewish Angle is up now, so you can probably check it out. And with that, let's actually get to some of the topics for the day. There's a big kerfuffle around a couple of films. October 8th, the movie, I do believe, was in development since October 9th, the day, and the ability for people to recognize that there was a significantly increased level of hatred that was going on college campuses across North America. as a result of the events on October 7th. I haven't seen the film. We weren't given a screener. It is going to be in limited release across Canada. I do believe it's in several theaters in Toronto, as well as in Buffalo, in Ohio, a couple of theaters that are showing it. And it's been in festivals and synagogues have been bringing it in and stuff like that. And I did see the trailer, and it's about the rise of hatred on college campuses in North America.
Hatred generally, or hatred against Jews specifically?
Hatred being directed against the Jewish students on campus. So that's the October 8th film, but concurrently there is another film called No Other Land, which is telling the story of a Palestinian village which has been suffering evictions from their homes, from their neighborhoods. There's an entire large piece of land that has villages there, and the IDF has been taking down their homes already since 2019. This film has been in development since 2019. A young Palestinian journalist with a couple of young Israeli journalists and filmmakers who have been documenting these homes being torn down. So this is not in Gaza, it is in the West Bank. That's something that I thought about when I was watching the film, because I did get to go see the film. That has a larger distribution, probably because it had won an Oscar for Best Documentary Feature, which we can get to in a second. But the thing that I noticed was that, the Gaza is under Hamas. The Palestinian Authority is the one in charge of the West Bank. And while to some people that might seem like, yes, they're in cahoots and it's the same thing, it doesn't feel like it's the same thing. And you don't hear about Hamas as much within the discussions in No Other Land. That, was something that weighed on me around that. But it has been warring, so to speak. People have been saying that they are competing for eyeballs within the space of documentaries right now, and communities seem to be divided. Go to this one, I would never pay anything to go see that one, and vice versa.
So my understanding of these two movies is that one is kind of like a higher brow, real movie sort of movie, and the other is more of a intentionally propagandistic. Even if they're both opinionated and propagandistic in their ways, one of them is more like being treated seriously as art more than the other one. Is that correct?
I think one is being treated more as art, although that one actually feels grittier and less glossy and less slick. It's just
but slick could be like a propaganda thing. You know what I mean?
Correct.
Yeah.
So, I'm not saying when you say it's higher budget, higher brow.
I didn't say higher budget. I mean just sort of more of when I learned that there were these two battling documentaries, I thought that's great. Both sides should be telling their stories and, fight speech with speech and all that. So to me, it seems like a good thing that different documentaries from different perspectives exist. And also, aside from just documentaries, there is anti-Semitism on college campuses, and there is awful stuff happening in the West Bank. And I don't say this to equate the two. I'm just saying that these are both two things in the world, real things in the world. And it seems like, why not have documentaries about both? I'm not a big documentary buff, but I support, speech. And I don't see why the same person couldn't see both. I don't see that.
I think that they should. And I do believe that I saw some theaters were screening one after the other. There was an article about this in the Hollywood Reporter, and it had mentioned that some theaters were saying people should be able to see both, and that they were screening them back to back for people to be able to go and make their own minds. When I went to No Other Land, it did not seem like there was a lot of pro-Israel people coming to check out what the other side was saying.
How would you know, though?
Meaning there was a lot of keffiyehs, but there wasn't a lot of Zionist shirts and a lot of dog tags saying "Bring them home now." And those people were not in attendance. While there was a lot more visible symbols of the Palestinian cause at that. That's one screening. I'm not going to make larger judgments about it. I guess documentaries should have some sort of perspective. They're not necessarily strict journalism. It seems like they're both really polemics. I feel like they're crafted in a very specific way to give their story. There was no end title that at the end of No Other Land that said we reached out to the IDF or having an IDF
the
person
IOF
on it. The IOF. And look, this is footage that's been filmed over several years. This is a story that is absolutely true, absolutely heartbreaking. But it's also, one lens of it. Is there stories in the other direction that can be said equally about things that Israeli settlers have been victims of? 100%. Does that make it either side right or wrong? No. They're both right and they're both wrong. And people should not have their homes destroyed and people shouldn't be terrorized. And this story, is really compelling to tell you and to help you understand what's going on with people whose homes are being destroyed for seemingly like the most arbitrary reasons. And yet you look at the October 8th movie, 100% same sort of thing. It's a polemic in the absolute other direction.
Well, there's a limit to what we can say about it, neither of us having seen it.
Again, although the one thing that I did notice, right, even from the trailer, was when one of the talking heads, and there was a lot of high-profile talking heads, Deborah Messing is on there, Michael Rapaport is on there, Scott Galloway is on there, right? These are all, big names in North American culture. And somebody with more than one person started equating what was going on to say that A, this is a decades-long playbook that they have been doing to try to infiltrate college campuses, and B, that there was this direct correlation between what was going on with Hamas and Israel-Palestine and all of that stuff with the destabilization of Western democracies. Right, that this was directly correlated with that they're trying to remove Western democracies from existing. And I was like, those two are both a bit of a stretch, if you ask me.
Mm-hmm. I mean, what's interesting there is at this moment in time, there's this big push in the States to crack down on pro-Palestinian activism. And it's being done in the name of fighting anti-Semitism, but it's also being done against the wishes of I venture to guess most American Jews, given how American Jews vote and given which American Jews are speaking out against it, including many who are pretty center-right. If, thinking of like William Crystal of The Bulwark, formerly of The Weekly Standard, people like this, like there's a lot of anguish from American Jews saying like, no, please do not round up visa-having students and say it's to fight anti-Semitism. So the reason I bring this up now is because I think there's this push from the Trump administration to suggest that the way to defend American values, specifically, not just Western values, but American values specifically, is to fight pro-Palestinian activism. And it just runs up against the fact that this does not seem to be something that Jews are asking for.
I can't help but think of the Red Scare when there was this notion of like, these things are un-American. And even though they come up against free speech, we are going to, hunt them down and we're going to prosecute them. And Jews were often on the other side. And that didn't go well for American values either, for Western values either. I think you have to say that terrorism is forbidden, and you have to have clear definitions of what that looks like. But to go and say that all of these people are being prosecuted because of certain speech is a problem. Yes,
I mean,
100%.
I think this really does not bode well for particularly American Jews, just in that if being pro-Jewish, like I've been talking now for years about the problem of fighting anti-Semitism being a right-wing coded fight, but more specifically now, if the fight against anti-Semitism is now coded as MAGA, and at the same time, if pushing back against Trump is coded as you have to wear a keffiyeh and go to that type of rally, this is an interesting realignment that I don't think bodes particularly well for Jews.
Yeah, I don't disagree. What I'm curious about is, what do you make of this, like, quote unquote, insidious, decades-long plan to conquer college campuses with Palestinian, the Palestinian cause, right? I don't know who's in charge specifically setting out the orders, but this was in the trailer, and this is a statement that I've heard again and again and again. I
mean, I'm sure that pro-Palestinian and pro-Israel propaganda departments or whatever exist, but I'm not the one I'm not expert on either side of that.
I mean, the thing that struck me was Israel has been doing this for decades just as much, right? They call it Hasbara, and they call it being pro-Israel, and they send out people from the foreign ministry and the Jewish agency to go and be, emissaries, shlichim, to the Jewish communities and to college campuses to go and talk about pro-Israel stuff all the time. And to go and say, well, we're allowed to do it, but you're not.
I mean, I think American young people used to be kind of like, I don't want to say maybe unique in the Western world in not being super into the Palestinian cause, whereas this was a big thing in Canada and in Europe. So it's new in the States.
I'm curious how you felt as a, on on a college campus, because when I was on a college campus, this was a big issue. And I always assumed that was because Quebec was very much aligned with the pro-Palestinian cause, right? They saw themselves as two, separatist movements that were looking for independence from a larger, political and social body. And therefore, that's why it was big in Quebec, but I didn't necessarily assume that it was big anywhere else.
Yeah. So, this was not last week, but I was at the University of Chicago. That's where I did undergrad. This was like during the Iraq War, the second. And what I remember was a lot of sort of from the faculty. Like I majored in French, and I remember having a professor who had us all over for dinner and served us wine, even though we were all not 21, but whatever, neither here nor there, ancient history. And his wife, who was French, was like making a big thing about like Israel and so forth in a way that I found, if I had different inclinations, I would have taken more of a Bari Weiss type approach to this. Instead, I was just like, oh, that's annoying, and probably wrote a campus op-ed or something. I don't know, which can now get you deported in the States if you do the wrong campus op-ed. But yeah, I do remember there being a sort of anti-Zionist flavored anti-Semitism around, and also sort of like an anti-cosmopolitan anti-Semitism, like the old school kind of like suspicion of the people from New York who went to the Midwest for college, whatever. Was there a huge movement for Palestine? No, I wouldn't say that was the case. No.
Yeah.
And then when I was in France, I remember like studying abroad and stuff, like much more like Palestinian cause accoutrement or whatever.
And so I guess to a lot of Americans, it feels like it's sudden, but I don't think that it's sudden.
It's not sudden in the world. It is sudden in America,
yeah,
is what I'm saying.
Americans need to recognize that there is a greater, world out there outside of America, and they need to recognize.
Good luck on that front.
Yeah, I know. Like Americans were like, oh, this is not happening. It's not. Israel's great. Everybody loves Israel. And then all of a sudden not realizing that for decades this has been happening everywhere else in the world. It comes to America and they're like, oh, this is horrible. This is the worst thing ever. And then you have movies like October 8th. And then the same thing is true, I guess, on the other side, right? That the West Bank has been having homes being torn down and villages being eradicated from Palestinians. That is something that the Jewish community needs to know has been happening for a very long time as well.
Yeah. As in so many cases, the people who need to hear the other thing are not going to be the ones.
Yes, correct.
It. But it should just be, here's a thought. I'm not actually serious. If you buy a ticket for one, you should be shown the
other. I
other.
literally was thinking that. I was literally thinking like that they should only sell tickets if you're willing to go see the ticket to movies for the other one as well.
Oh, there you go. I think mine was a little bit more malicious, that you like are literally showing the other thing.
On the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz comes an unprecedented exhibition about one of history's darkest moments. Auschwitz, not long ago, not far away, features more than 500 original objects, first-hand accounts, and survivor testimonies that tell the powerful story of the Auschwitz concentration camp, its history and legacy, and the underlying conditions that allowed the Holocaust to happen. On now exclusively at ROM. Tickets at rom.ca.
Speaking about academia, I know that there is other stuff happening around this and academia, and something you've been following around. Can you fill us in, please, and help me understand a little bit what's going on with these professors that are threatening to leave?
Sure. So I saw these headlines about the professors leaving the United States for Canada because of the fascism in the United States as they saw it. And I thought, okay, that sounds like a wave. That sounds like a movement. Something is happening. It's like I was thinking of like, obviously, Hannah Arendt, Einstein, all the 1930s emigration, right? That's what I was picturing. And then I clicked on one of these articles and was struck by the fact that this was about 3 people, of whom 2 are a married couple. So effectively, we're talking about 2 moves, right? And then I looked a little more closely and saw that the married couple, and I'm going to get into who all these people are and who's Jewish, don't worry. The married couple are professors at Yale, and they have not given up their roles at Yale. They are on leave from Yale. They're going to be at the University of Toronto but while still with the ability to say, never mind, I'm going back to Yale at any moment. And I think this matters for just how we understand what we're talking about here. It's not to say that they're not doing anything of any significance, but just like before getting very excited about this, all the professors going to Canada, remember it's 3 people, 2 are a married couple who could go back to Yale at any time. So it's Marcy Shore and Timothy Snyder are the couple. And they're both historians. And then there's Jason Stanley, also going from Yale to the University of Toronto, seemingly definitively, who's a philosophy professor. These are extremely, extremely A-list professors, like the top of the field, like best-selling author style people. So they're famous people, right? So they're not just like...
Are you saying that because they are not adjuncts who are barely clinging onto a job by their nails, they can do whatever they want, while the vast majority of other academics really don't have the liberty to do that, even if they want to?
Yes. So I am saying that, but I think that what you make of that matters, because I think you could also say they have the ability to be at Yale, which most people, and tenured professors at Yale, which most people don't. And if they're choosing to give that up, that's significant too. So they also have more to lose in a way than other people.
Sure.
Some of how this is getting reported is not super positive towards Canada, specifically when Jason Stanley was interviewed as saying that like the only reason he was making the move was the political situation in the United States, which I thought was like a little bit insulting. Like imagine if you're changing jobs and you say like the only reason I'm taking this new job is because something horrendous happened at my old job. Wouldn't that seem a little insulting to your new job? Like a little, no?
No,
you don't think so?
You're not saying anything bad about the new job. You're saying I had to leave my old job, and that's the reason why I'm leaving, is because it was horrendous there.
I do see what you're saying. I guess I just mean in terms of how Canada comes across in these stories, it sometimes is presented as it's this kind of last resort option for American professors, which I don't think quite makes sense for a variety of reasons, one of which is that there are not, for better or worse, jobs waiting for everybody who wants one in Canada.
There was a band a long time ago, a comedy duo or trio called the Arrogant Worms, and they had a song about how they were proud to be Canadian. And one of the lines in the chorus was, it's not that we are better, it's just that we're less worse. And, that's kind of what's being said here. And then, as Canadians, we can take that.
You think so? Okay. There are parts of my column about this that got a little snarky, I will admit, including where
Phoebe, if you wrote a column and it didn't have any snark in it, I would wonder if it was written by ChatGPT.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I think it would. ChatGPT would just do the snark, but like give it a 6th finger or something. I wrote also about this newsletter by Daniel Dresner, who's, I don't remember if he still has or did have a Washington Post column, but he's also a political scientist at Tufts, where he's writing, like the whole point of the newsletter is that he's not going to leave the U.S. Mm-hmm. And I saw this and I thought, has anybody asked you to?
All of this is very similar to what happened in 2015 when Trump won the first time. And you had all these Americans that were like, oh, so we're going to move to America. We're going to move to Canada. We're going to move to Canada. We're going to move to Canada. Nobody actually did. There's always stories of like, well, who actually moved, a year later? And you don't find many people, if any. And on top of that, there is that in the zeitgeist. So you can imagine somebody writing a column saying why I'm actually not going to move to Canada right now, because I think the fight is to fight here. Nobody asked the person, but they're making their opinion. If you think that I'm of this world of professors that want to move to Canada, then I'm not, and that's fine.
As I did also say in the column, I do think that anybody with a public role who's speaking out against injustices coming from the Trump administration at this point in time is doing something courageous, whether they're doing it in the States, whether they're doing it in Canada. I don't think it really, at the end of the day, matters. I think it is important to speak out and should be praised. And I think, it's very easy to be like, oh, these are a bunch of self-important people who imagine whatever they decide to do with their lives is newsworthy. And maybe they are, but they're still doing something important.
Yeah. I'm a big believer in action and not words. But when you are a thinker, your words are your actions. So in some way that is, and giving people the language to sort of help them think about what they're doing and what they're living through is useful. And I don't have a problem with that. I think that that's good. And I think, there's been a lot said about people that are being pulled aside at customs for their social media posts and their anti-Israel positions and how they're being detained. And there are definitely some really, really scary high-profile cases of people who legally belong in America and are being sent out of America, but the same way that the moving away from America to Canada has been overblown, the people being detained at the border have been overblown just as much. And I don't think that it's really as big a concern. I think that we should be watching out for stuff, but people that are courageous and want to say things regardless of whether they're going to get in trouble at the border, yes, 100%. Good for them.
And yeah, I mean, if you want more on the Jewish angle on all of that with these professors, that is all in my column. So there is Jewish stuff in there.
And yeah, so before we move on to Nachas, our final Nachas, a final plug for the Jewish angle. Go check that out. Subscribe, and you don't have to subscribe if you're on this already. But Not in Heaven is coming up, and that's the final plug for that as well.
And cheers to a great run. This has been a lot of fun.
Do you have any Nachas, Phoebe?
I do have some nachas, and I hope I haven't already nachased it because I may re-nachas. But there's a new bakery and cafe in Toronto. So sorry if you're not in Toronto, it may not be relevant, but you'll pass through Toronto, and it will be. That is Jewish themed. So I think I had once nachased Bread's Bakery. Is that right? It's like a French bakery, but like with kind of a Jewish twist. Toronto has its own such thing, and it's not new to the city entirely, but it's new to downtown, and it's called Amadeus. It's located just north of Bloor at Bay, so pretty central. And it has your usual like croissants, macarons, baguettes, things like that, but also has like Hamantaschen.
Okay, I was going to ask, what makes it Jewish aside from being annexed eventually as an Austrian bakery?
It has Hamantaschen, some za'atar pastry of some sort that I have not tried, but I have tried the French pastries, and those are very good. I don't believe it's kosher, but it is definitely Jewish, and it is definitely a place that is in downtown Toronto and has croissants, so I'm all about that. And more special, it has seating, which is not a given in Toronto, that a place is comfortable to sit in. Something I did notice about it, though, and this is going to be why it's kind of like a little bit topical for Bonjour High and so forth, there's a security guard at the front when you go in. And I remember noticing this and thinking, is this because it's like, and getting my kind of like, oh no, is it like a JCC, like in one of these things? And then I remembered that no, in the last, like, I don't know, 6 months or so, every store at Bloor and Young in that area has security. Like Lululemon will have like cops, or, you know what I mean? Like everything just has security in front of it now. So I don't think that this is like guarding the Hamantaschen specifically. I think this is just a kind of urban spaces thing that has nothing to do with that. But regardless, Amadeus, French, Jewish, Bonjour High-ish, fun stuff. I enjoyed it, and it is where I wrote part of what will be my column on Monday. What have you got?
My nachas is for Phoebe Maltz-Bovey because, like Amadeus Bakery, she is downtown Toronto. She is Jewish, but not kosher. She has seating, but she does not have a security guard.
Fair enough.
No, I mean, I definitely, that is, I can come up with another nachas, which is that Bruce Springsteen just announced that he's releasing 7 albums today at the end of June. It is long rumored that these 7 albums have been recorded and mixed and just not put out because he decided it wasn't the right time, or he just didn't want to put this out. And now he's putting them all out at once at the end of June. It is like Rosh Hashanah and Simchat Torah and all the holidays rolled into one for Springsteen fans. So, that is definitely a nachas for me. But yes, 100% Phoebe, I'm going to have to say it has been a wonderful time spending a few years in front of a screen with you at the other side of it. And it's just such great nachas. So
likewise,
good for you.
Likewise.
Thank you for listening to Bonjour Chai for the week ending April 5th, Shabbat Parshat Vayikra. The show is produced by Michael Freeman and edited by Zach Kaufman. The executive producer for CJN Podcast is Michael Freeman. Our music is by So-Called. We are a project of the Jewish Living Lab and are distributed by the CJN Podcast Network. You can listen to all our past episodes on our page at thecjn.ca/bonjour, and you can subscribe to the podcast and automatically receive all episodes on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We would love it if you told a friend about Bonjour Chai. It is one of the best ways we get new listeners, and as always, you can email us with comments at bonjour@thecjn.ca.
On the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz comes an unprecedented exhibition about one of history's darkest moments. Auschwitz, Not Long Ago, Not Far Away, features more than 500 original objects, first-hand accounts, and survivor testimonies that tell the powerful story of the Auschwitz concentration camp, its history and legacy, and the underlying conditions that allowed the Holocaust to happen. On now exclusively at ROM. Tickets at rom.ca.